Picture this, a high-end bank where appearances mean everything. Crystal clear glass doors, polished marble floors, and a steady flow of well-dressed customers moving in and out. For those who work here, status isn't just a detail. It's how they decide who deserves respect. Please like and subscribe for more stories. Today, Adisa, a man of humble appearance but powerful presence, steps into this very bank. He's not dressed in designer clothes or flaunting luxury accessories. In fact, he looks like just any regular man, wearing a simple, comfortable outfit. But unknown to the staff and customers around him, Adisa is far from ordinary. He's a successful black man, a self-made individual who values respect and fairness more than showy status symbols. With a calm expression, Adisa walks up to the counter, looking forward to a straightforward interaction. But as he approaches, he notices something odd. The teller, sharply dressed with a professional air, looks at him with a hint of judgment. Her eyes flick over his casual attire, and there's a subtle change in her attitude. She's already decided he doesn't belong among her important clients. Unfazed, Adisa politely waits his turn. The teller's reaction doesn't surprise him. He's seen it before. What she doesn't know, though, is that this ordinary man in front of her is actually the bank's new owner. And soon enough, her judgmental attitude is about to backfire in a way she never expected. Inside the bustling bank, everything seemed to shine. From the spotless marble floors to the elegant chandeliers hanging overhead, every detail whispered of wealth and prestige. Customers moved with purpose, most of them dressed in high-end suits and sleek attire, exuding confidence. The bank catered to people who saw themselves as important, and the staff understood that. Here, it wasn't just about providing service, it was about serving the right kind of people. Behind the counter stood the bank's head teller, Miranda. She was known for her professionalism, but also for her sharp, judgmental gaze. With her tailored suit and polished demeanor, she looked every bit the part. Miranda had developed a habit over the years, a habit of sizing up each customer based on how they looked. To her, appearance often revealed a person's worth. As customers approached, Miranda's practiced eye would take in every detail. The quality of a watch, the brand of a handbag, the cut of a jacket. Each item silently confirmed if they belonged in her book of worthy clients. Those who didn't fit this image often received a colder, less patient version of her service. It wasn't that she was overtly rude, but the small gestures, a clipped tone, a dismissive glance, hinted at her bias. On this particular day, the bank was especially busy. A mix of wealthy business people and regular customers filled the lobby, all engaged in various transactions. The quiet hum of chatter and the tapping of keyboards filled the air, creating a professional, almost intimidating atmosphere. Then in walked Adisa. Clad in simple, everyday clothes, he was a contrast to the usual clientele. Heads turned subtly, noticing the man who didn't seem to belong in this world of suits and ties. Miranda, catching sight of him from her position, couldn't help but frown slightly. This wasn't the type of person she typically extended her full courtesy to. Adisa calmly approached her counter, standing patiently as Miranda finished up with her current customer. She gave him a quick, almost dismissive glance, her mind already jumping to conclusions. To her, he was just another ordinary visitor, someone who probably didn't have much business being here. Her practiced smile faded, replaced by a slightly more indifferent expression. Around them, the bank continued its busy routine. Staff members rushed about, and customers kept to themselves, unaware of the subtle tension brewing at Miranda's counter. Yet, in that seemingly routine moment, something significant was beginning. Miranda's unspoken judgment was setting the stage for an interaction that would challenge her views on respect and appearances. As Adisa stood there, waiting to be served, he noticed her shift in attitude. But instead of reacting, he stayed calm, with a knowing look in his eyes. He'd been in situations like this before, where his appearance often led people to underestimate him. Yet he was used to handling such moments with grace. Little did Miranda know, her actions today would reveal more about herself than she could imagine. Adisa was a man of quiet strength, a quality that seemed almost invisible to those who judge only by appearances. Born into a humble background, he had faced countless obstacles and worked tirelessly to reach the position he held today. From a young age, he learned the value of resilience and humility. qualities that guided him through every challenge life threw his way. But today, as he stood in line at the bank, dressed in simple, comfortable clothes, none of his achievements were visible to the outside world. On that day, Adisa wasn't there to flaunt his success. In fact, his reason for visiting was quite simple. He had just taken ownership of the bank, a quiet yet powerful milestone in his career. But he hadn't announced it to the staff, wanting to observe the bank's operations firsthand, as any ordinary customer would. For Adisa, being treated with genuine respect meant far more than receiving courtesy just because of his title. Standing patiently, Adisa's calm presence contrasted with the hurried, high-energy atmosphere around him. He watched as other customers, most of them dressed in formal suits, were greeted with enthusiastic smiles and attentive service. Despite the teller's dismissive attitude toward him, he maintained his composure, allowing her subtle judgments to reveal more about her character than his own. He understood that not everyone could see past appearances. It was a hard lesson he'd learned on his journey to success. Adisa's journey had been anything but easy. Growing up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, he had worked twice as hard to achieve his dreams. When people looked at him now, they saw only a casually dressed man, but his real story was one of grit, determination, and unbreakable will. Through his journey, he had faced prejudice and bias, often being judged solely by his appearance. It was because of these experiences that Adisa had always strived to treat everyone he met with respect and fairness. As he waited at the teller's counter, Adisa couldn't help but think of how many others like him were judged simply because they didn't fit someone's narrow idea of success. His presence in the bank that day wasn't just a personal visit, it was a statement. By owning this bank, he hoped to create an environment where people were treated with respect, regardless of how they looked or dressed. But for now, he watched as Miranda, the teller, continued to dismiss him. To her, he was just another ordinary man, possibly even a nuisance in her eyes. Her subtle sighs, her lack of eye contact, each action spoke volumes. She seemed oblivious to the man standing in front of her, a man who had not only achieved financial success, but had also earned the respect of countless people in his life. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Adisa. Here he was, the owner of this very bank, standing before a teller who judged him as if he were an outsider. But instead of letting her attitude get to him, he remained grounded, silently observing. He knew that his time to reveal the truth would come, and when it did, it would be a lesson in humility that Miranda wouldn't soon forget. In his mind, Adisa thought back to the people who had doubted him, who had overlooked him simply because he didn't fit their expectations. Today was just another reminder that success wasn't something worn on the outside. It was built through hard work, perseverance, and self-belief. And soon enough, Miranda would see that appearances, no matter how deceiving, were never the true measure of a person's worth. As Adisa reached the teller's counter, he offered a polite smile and a simple greeting. Miranda, the teller, barely glanced up from her computer screen. She gave a quick, dismissive nod, as if to acknowledge his presence, but didn't return the smile. Adisa waited patiently, hoping that a bit of kindness might soften her demeanor, but instead he was met with a cold and distant attitude. "Can I help you?" she asked in a clipped tone, without even making proper eye contact. Adisa, unfazed by her indifference, responded calmly. "I'd like to make an inquiry on an account, please." At his words, Miranda's brows knitted slightly, and she gave him a brief, doubtful look. To her, he seemed out of place. His casual attire didn't match her expectations for someone handling serious financial matters. But Adisa, keeping his composure, simply waited as she glanced over the computer, sighing subtly, a sign of her irritation. "Do you have an account here?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Adisa nodded, keeping his tone polite, though he sensed the judgment behind her words. "Yes, I do," he replied, extending his identification without hesitation. Miranda took his ID reluctantly, still unable to hide her skepticism. She gave it a quick glance, her eyes barely meeting his, before turning back to her screen. As she began typing, Adisa noticed her subtle shift in body language. Her posture was rigid, and her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, almost as if she couldn't wait to get this transaction over with. She didn't know who he really was, and her actions suggested she didn't care to find out. In her mind, he was just another customer, someone she could deal with briskly and then dismiss. The atmosphere grew tense, though Adisa remained calm. He knew what was happening, knew that she had already judged him based on his appearance, but he also knew something she didn't. He was the owner of this very bank. Adisa watched as she continued her work, occasionally throwing him another glance, as if checking to see if he would cause any trouble. After a moment, Miranda looked up, her face a mixture of impatience and indifference. "There's nothing unusual with your account, sir," she said, her tone almost dismissive, as if eager to move on to her next task. Adisa paused, sensing her impatience, but decided to give her one more chance to show some respect. "Thank you, but I do have another question," he replied softly, his voice steady. He could see a flash of irritation in her eyes, a sign that she was growing tired of the conversation. Still, Adisa remained calm, his presence a silent reminder that he wasn't there to be treated as less than anyone else. In the background, a few other employees had started to notice the exchange. Their glances didn't go unnoticed by Adisa, and he felt a strange mix of emotions. He was aware of the power he held but chose not to flaunt it. Instead, he allowed the encounter to unfold naturally, knowing it would be a lesson not only for Miranda, but for the entire bank staff. With each passing moment, the tension grew, yet Adisa's patience remained unbroken. He could have revealed his true identity right then, but something inside him wanted to see how far Miranda's judgment would go. He wanted her to realize the cost of treating people differently based on mere appearances. Miranda, still oblivious to the true nature of her customer, didn't seem to realize the opportunity she was missing, the chance to treat every individual with respect, regardless of how they looked. But soon enough, her perception would change, and the revelation awaiting her would be more than just a moment of surprise. As the conversation continued, Miranda's impatience began to show more clearly. She glanced at the clock, a subtle hint that she felt her time was being wasted. Meanwhile, Adisa's calm demeanor remained unchanged, but there was a growing heaviness in the air. It was as if everyone around them could feel the tension building, though they weren't sure why. After answering another question, Miranda let out a barely audible sigh, one that Adisa couldn't miss. Her eyes drifted past him, focusing on other customers who, in her view, seemed more important. She adjusted her posture, as if to signal she was ready to move on, hoping he'd take the hint and leave. But Adisa stayed put, unbothered by her impatience. "Is there anything else, sir?" she asked, her tone less courteous, as though he were an inconvenience. Her words came out sharper, and for the first time, a few heads nearby turned to watch. Miranda noticed the attention too, and she tried to disguise her frustration with a forced smile, though her eyes still held a judgmental glint. Adisa decided it was time to push back, ever so slightly. "Actually, yes, I'd like a bit more clarification on some of the bank's policies," he said, his tone respectful yet firm. He noticed her frown deepen, her patience wearing thin. The more questions he asked, the more obvious it became that she didn't feel he was worth her time. Miranda's voice took on a sharper edge as she responded. "Sir, our policies are standard. If you have any further questions, maybe it would be best if you speak with another representative," she suggested, almost as if dismissing him. To her, it seemed a subtle way of moving him along without making a scene. Yet the underlying disrespect was clear, but Adisa didn't flinch. "I appreciate your help so far," he replied, his voice calm and steady, "but I'd prefer to continue working with you. I trust you understand the bank's policies well." His words, gentle yet firm, left Miranda with no polite way to brush him off. A sense of quiet power surrounded him, and this seemed to unsettle her. She stiffened, realizing he wasn't going to be rushed away so easily. Around them, a few employees and customers were now fully aware of the growing tension. Miranda felt their eyes on her, but her pride pushed her forward, unwilling to back down. At that moment, a manager, sensing something was wrong, stepped closer, observing the scene from a short distance. The manager knew Adisa's identity but chose to remain silent, allowing the encounter to unfold naturally. Miranda, still unaware, continued to press on with her dismissive attitude, her judgment clouded by the assumptions she'd made from the start. Feeling her composure waver, Miranda attempted to reassert control. "Sir, if you're not satisfied, perhaps you could schedule an appointment for a more detailed discussion," she suggested, her tone now bordering on condescension. But Adisa met her gaze, his calmness unshaken. "Thank you, but I believe I deserve the same attention as any other customer here," he replied quietly. His words, though softly spoken, had an undeniable weight. The room seemed to grow still, and Miranda's face flushed as she felt her authority slip away. For the first time, Miranda hesitated, realizing she might have crossed a line. She shifted uncomfortably, but her pride wouldn't let her admit fault. Instead, she forced a tight smile and nodded, pretending to be unfazed. Around them, a silent crowd had formed, employees and customers alike sensing that something significant was happening. Adisa's patience was slowly peeling away Miranda's polished facade, exposing the prejudice beneath her professional appearance. The once busy bank lobby had become a quiet stage, with everyone waiting to see how the scene would unfold. Without missing a beat, Adisa continued. "I'd like to know how this bank treats its clients," he said, his voice still calm but with a hint of resolve that Miranda could no longer ignore. The question hung in the air, challenging her to respond honestly. Miranda, caught off guard, hesitated. She finally looked him in the eye, seeing for the first time the depth of his quiet confidence. A flash of doubt crossed her face as she realized he might be more than he appeared. The silence around them was almost deafening, with everyone watching and waiting. Then, without warning, the manager stepped forward, breaking the tension. "Is everything all right here, sir?" he asked, addressing Adisa with the respect he deserved. Miranda's eyes widened as she saw the manager's deferential tone, and her heart sank as a realization began to dawn on her. This wasn't just any customer. The air grew thick with anticipation as the truth teetered on the edge, ready to reveal itself. Miranda's once confident demeanor began to crumble, replaced by a hint of fear. She had spent the entire encounter judging Adisa, completely unaware of his true identity. And in that moment, she understood that her assumptions would cost her more than just a moment of discomfort. The encounter was no longer just about a transaction. It had become a powerful lesson on respect, one that Miranda wouldn't soon forget. The manager's presence shifted the energy in the room. He approached with an air of respect, addressing Adisa in a way that felt completely at odds with how Miranda had treated him. Miranda's heart raced as she watched the interaction, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. Why was her manager speaking to this casually dressed man with such deference? Adisa turned to the manager, acknowledging him with a polite nod. The manager, fully aware of who Adisa was, met his gaze, his voice steady. "Is there anything I can assist you with, Mr. Adisa?" he asked, emphasizing his name with respect and warmth. The moment the words left the manager's mouth, Miranda's world seemed to stop. The realization hit her like a wave. Mr. Adisa. This wasn't just an ordinary customer. He was the new owner of the bank. Her face went pale as she pieced together the situation, the weight of her actions settling heavily on her. Adisa observed her reaction, a calm expression on his face. He didn't gloat or smirk. Instead, he simply allowed her to process the revelation. The quiet dignity he had maintained throughout the encounter now spoke louder than any reprimand. Miranda's mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. She felt a mixture of shock, shame, and regret. Her mind raced back through every dismissive look, every condescending word she had thrown his way. Now each one felt like a mistake she couldn't take back. "I wanted to see how things were handled here," Adisa said, addressing both Miranda and the manager. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to his words that filled the air. "It's important to me that every customer, no matter how they look, feels respected when they come here." The manager nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. He glanced at Miranda, his expression shifting to one of quiet disappointment. Miranda lowered her gaze, her face flushed with embarrassment. She wanted to apologize, but the words felt tangled, trapped in the knot of regret and self-reflection forming in her chest. Adisa continued, his tone even but purposeful. "People deserve respect, regardless of appearance or status. That's something I hold close to my heart. It's why I took ownership of this bank, to create a place where everyone feels valued." Around them, the room had fallen silent, with employees and customers alike hanging on to every word. They could feel the impact of the moment, understanding that this was more than just a personal lesson for Miranda. It was a reminder to everyone present. Respect and humility were values that transcended appearances, and Adisa's presence was a testament to that truth. Miranda's voice finally emerged, trembling with emotion. "Mr. Adisa, I... I didn't know," she stammered, her eyes filling with remorse. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong to judge you like that." Adisa met her gaze, his expression softening just slightly. "Thank you for saying that," he replied. "It's easy to judge people based on what we see, but sometimes what we see isn't the full story." His words were kind yet firm, a gentle reminder of the impact her actions had. For a moment, Adisa looked around the bank, his eyes meeting those of other employees who had been silently observing. He could see the looks of understanding in their faces, the realization that they too could fall into the trap of judgment. Today wasn't just about teaching Miranda a lesson, it was a message for the entire team. The manager cleared his throat, sensing the need to restore the atmosphere with grace. "Mr. Adisa, thank you for your patience and understanding," he said. "We're fortunate to have a leader who values respect as much as you do." Adisa nodded, his gaze returning to Miranda. "I don't hold grudges, Miranda, but I do hope that from now on, you'll remember that everyone deserves kindness, not just those who look a certain way." His voice was soft, but the message landed with unmistakable power. Miranda nodded, her face a mix of relief and humility. She had been given a second chance, one that would leave a lasting impression. As Adisa turned to leave, the entire bank seemed to breathe a collective sigh of understanding and gratitude. The scene was unforgettable, and the lesson it carried would echo through each person present long after he was gone. As Adisa walked away from the counter, Miranda stood there rooted to the spot, her face still flushed with embarrassment. The weight of the moment settled heavily on her, and she felt an overwhelming sense of regret. She replayed the entire interaction in her mind, each dismissive glance and sharp word cutting deeper now that she understood the full reality. For the first time, she truly saw her own behavior and realized how quickly and easily she had judged a man she knew nothing about. In that quiet moment of reflection, she realized how often she'd made assumptions about people based on their appearance. She had placed people into boxes, treating them according to her own narrow view of what respectable looked like. But today her assumptions had been challenged, her perspective shaken to its core. She had witnessed firsthand the humility and grace of a man who could have easily held her accountable, but instead chose a path of understanding and respect. Feeling a surge of determination, Miranda approached her manager, her voice soft but resolute. "I owe Mr. Adisa more than just an apology," she began. "I treated him unfairly, and I want to make it right." Her manager gave her an understanding nod, sensing the sincerity in her tone. He had seen the transformation taking place in her, a shift from pride to humility that was rare and powerful. Taking a deep breath, Miranda knew she couldn't undo her actions, but she could start by acknowledging them and making a change. She resolved to treat every customer with the respect they deserved, regardless of appearance or background. It was a lesson she had learned the hard way, but one she knew would stay with her for a lifetime. The following day, Miranda arrived at work with a renewed purpose. As she served each customer, she focused on seeing them as individuals rather than judgments formed by her assumptions. Her tone was warmer, her attitude gentler, and her approach sincere. She made an effort to meet each person's gaze, to offer genuine assistance without letting their appearance cloud her perception. Her co-workers noticed the change, a subtle shift in the way she carried herself. The entire bank felt a ripple effect from the lesson Adisa had imparted, and soon other employees began to reflect on their own actions. It was as though his presence had planted a seed of respect and humility that was now taking root, inspiring each of them to think twice before judging others. A few days later, Adisa returned to the bank, this time dressed a bit more formally. He didn't come to check on his accounts or inspect the staff. He came to see if the lesson had truly made an impact. As he entered, Miranda saw him from across the room, her heart racing as she remembered their last encounter. This time she was prepared to welcome him with the respect and kindness he deserved, not because of who he was, but because of who she had chosen to become. She greeted him warmly, her voice steady but filled with sincerity. "Mr. Adisa, welcome back. It's an honor to serve you today." Her eyes met his, and Adisa saw a genuine change in her demeanor, a softness that hadn't been there before. It was clear to him that she had taken his words to heart, letting them shape her approach not only to him, but to everyone she served. Adisa smiled, a quiet look of approval in his eyes. He had hoped that his actions would leave an impact, that by choosing patience over confrontation, he could inspire change. And now, seeing Miranda's transformation, he knew that his choice had made a difference. For Miranda, the encounter had become more than just a lesson in respect. It was a reminder that humility and kindness could bridge any divide, regardless of background or appearance. As Adisa completed his business and prepared to leave, Miranda thanked him sincerely. "Thank you for teaching me something I needed to learn," she said softly. "I won't forget it." Adisa nodded, acknowledging her words with a gentle smile, knowing that this was only the beginning of a lasting change. From that day forward, the atmosphere in the bank was different. Miranda's redemption had sparked a new level of respect within the team, a reminder that every interaction, no matter how brief, held the potential to make an impact. And as for Adisa, he left with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that by showing patience and understanding, he had inspired not just one person, but an entire workplace to see beyond appearances and embrace the true value of respect. Thank you for watching. This story reminds us all to look beyond appearances and treat everyone with respect. If this touched you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt judged or seen someone treated unfairly? We'd love to hear your story. If you want more stories like this, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Together, we can spread kindness and understanding.